Well, I'm here at the International Slavery Museum here in Liverpool City, and it's a very interesting site to have a look at the history of one of the saddest events in the history of mankind. We're talking about the slavery of the African people. The story of international slave trade, which is part of our history as a people. This is a story that we must all seek to know and to tell others about. It is no secret that the transatlantic slave trade, which involved the selling of Africans, my ancestors, as objects that could be sold for money so that they could go and work in plantations in the Americas. No doubt this is a very dark story, a very dark chapter in the history of the world. And this is not a political statement that I'm trying to make. It's not any form of, politically or racially inspired statement. I'm just appreciating my history, and I'm acknowledging what my people went through. And I visited the International Slavery Museum here in Liverpool City, where I have been a resident for some years now in this city. And despite the ugliness and darkness of that chapter in history, in the history of the world, you realize that, yes, there have been efforts to silence that story and to hide and just neglect the history of slavery. But it's encouraging to see that there's a slavery museum, for example. It's encouraging to see that some people are making efforts to publish and to preserve this particular history, so that generations and generations will not lose, will not be able to completely go without having some memory of some sort of the amount of injustice and the amount of inhumane treatment and subjection to very, very really undeserved suffering that my people went through. So this is simply an appreciation, I'm just acknowledging history. It's good, and it helps to appreciate where a generation, what a generation went through, and what, not actually a generation, but generations of African slaves, what they went through and what they experienced, and probably what lessons can be learned or acquired. Liverpool City, where I am at currently, was a major slaving port, and its ships and merchants dominated the transatlantic slave trade in the second half of the 18th century. The town and its inhabitants derived great civic and personal wealth from the trade, which laid the foundations for the port's future growth. As such, this collection reflects, I'm just reading a statement on the museum's website. As such, this collection reflects our understanding of the deep and permanent impact the history of transatlantic slavery has had around the world and on the city of Liverpool. Well, friends, I think this is just one of the toughest stories that there is out there. It's sad to see how the world treated a people. It's sad to see how um, people were sold as objects. It's sad to see how people made wealth and riches and laid foundations of cities and ports and um, great, you know, infrastructure from wealth that was acquired from the selling of human beings as slaves. I will not say much because I know we are in a digital age. You can search and gather some information for yourself online and check different accounts of history and just see so that you can appreciate where, especially my African brothers and sisters, you can see where we are coming from and where we are going. It's inspiring, however, despite how difficult and tough this story is, isn't it inspiring to see the advances we've made? Isn't it inspiring to see that despite these crushing experiences that our ancestors went through, that we are still here and we are pressing forward. We are not the least that we are moving forward and indeed doing exploits. Isn't it amazing how God can lift someone from the ashes and the dust and just help them to rise up and shake off the dust and be able to do something meaningful? Isn't it amazing? Well, I took a few pictures and I will be sharing them. I've been sharing them, of course, and I just want to read some of the wonderful pieces of writing that I observed. I want to read through some of them. So one person here says that is William Prescott, who's said to be a former slave. He's quoted as saying, "They will remember that we were sold, but not that we were strong. They will remember that we were bought, but not that we were brave." Well, another statement here reads, "This museum explores how millions of Africans were forced into slavery, the crucial part that Liverpool played in this process, and how there are permanent consequences for people living in Africa, the Caribbean, North and South America, and Western Europe. This story has been neglected by too many for too long." Abraham Lincoln is quoted here as saying, "In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free." Frederick Douglass is quoted here as saying, "No man can put a chain about the ankle of his fellow man without at last finding the other end fastened about his own neck." Well, Martin Luther King is quoted here as saying, "Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." All right. Universal Declaration of Human Rights is quoted as a statement reading that no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Okay, that's okay. Another statement here reads that the story of the transatlantic slavery is fundamental and tragic human story that must be told and retold and never be forgotten. Africa and its people are central to this story. And then that section of the museum explores some threads in the complex weave of Africa's history. All right. And another statement here reads, this from Granville Sharp: a toleration of slavery is in effect a toleration of inhumanity, and I totally and 100% agree. Another statement here reads that you can only protect your liberties in this world by protecting the other man's freedom. You can only be free if I am free, and that's true. Well, another statement here reads, for to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. And that's Nelson Mandela. And that's obviously true. And then somebody is quoted, this anonymous, saying, I prefer liberty with danger to peace with slavery. Me too. Epictetus is quoted here saying, is freedom anything but the right to live as we wish? Nothing else. All right. And another statement here, another quote from Gloria Steinem: slavery still exists. Indeed, it is more diverse and entrenched than it ever was before. Yeah, that's 2006. And it's true. And another statement here says, consider slavery. What is it? What it is, how bitter a drought, and how many millions are meant to drink. Well. Well, another section here of the museum. This is the story of how the transatlantic slave trade operated. It shows what happened to enslaved Africans, their sufferings on the Middle Passage across the Atlantic, and the lives they had in the Americas. It tells how Europeans have benefited from slavery. Well, that's not me, it's in the museum. Well. Another picture here shows an hospital, a prison, and a punishment yard. The buildings of the plantation complex look impressive. They were constructed by enslaved Africans. The sick house or hospital, its windows barred, contained articles for restraint and was generally situated next to the prison and punishment yard. Here, Africans were whipped, beaten, and placed in the stocks, or forced to wear mansos, shackles or punishment collars, plantation punishment books, record legs and ears chopped off, my God, noses slit, and lashes delivered. Oh my God, Lord have mercy. There's another depiction here of the slave village, and it says, across the region, slave villages were constructed by the enslaved themselves. The Africans carried their culture with them across the Atlantic, and it was in the village that they recreated their customs in a new world. Lord have mercy. Here they told stories of the ancestors, made head dresses and adornments, and held religious ceremonies. They set up their own courts and decided on disputes and complaints without the knowledge of their owners. Tough times. It must have been dark days. But they remained resilient. They remained hopeful. And this is a story that we will live to tell. We will keep telling. It inspires us. It helps us appreciate our history and our resilience as a people, and our God-given tenacity and capacity to rise up from literally any setback. All right. Well, there's another depiction here of an interesting phenomenon. They are calling it resistance. And here it says, despite the threat of punishment, the enslaved Africans frequently ran away or organized revolts. They formed communities of runaways called Maroons and committed suicide. Oh, God have mercy. Rebels took over St. John's Island in the Caribbean for 6 months in 1733, and all committed suicide rather than surrender. Jesus Christ. Well, this must have been tough. This sort of resistance is recorded. It is not easy to see individual acts of resistance like deliberately spoiling a job, breaking machinery, or committing arson, but you can see them if you read between the lines of the European observers of the time. My friends, is there a darker story than this? God of mercy. Well, there's another statement here. Great news from Barbados, or a true and faithful account of the grand conspiracy of Negroes against the English in 1676. And it's written here that the devil was in the Englishman, that he makes everything work. He makes the Negro work, the horse work, the ass work, the wood work, and the wind work. Well, there's another one here about the plantation. It says, the plantation was a farm and a factory, a completely self-contained unit. Whatever the crop, that could be tobacco, coffee, cotton, indigo, or sugar, everything was organized for maximum profit. The plantation operated like a lumber camp, and the plantation owner acted like a dictator. Two field slaves, Mary Reynolds and Esther Montenjo, will tell you how they were worked beyond endurance. Mary Prince, Harriet Jacobs, and Francisco Mazzano were house slaves. Their stories will tell you that although their work was less strenuous, they also faced abuse and sexual exploitation. By contrast, Scottish traveller Janet Shaw and the governor of Jamaica's wife, Mary Nugan, will give you a guided tour of the great house and gardens and tell you about the plantation owner's life. And then it says here, use the touch screens to hear their testimonies. Well, that's in the museum facility. They have those touch screens where you can listen in and watch some testimonies. There's another one here about the sugar factory. It says, cultivating sugar was a labor-intensive business. The sap spoils very quickly and must be processed within 24 hours. During harvesting, a night shift was ended. Sugar boiling entailed a heat so extreme that water had to be sprayed onto the roof to prevent it catching fire. Wow. A machete was kept in the mill to sever a limb if a tired worker was dragged into the machinery. Oh my God. Oh. Sad stories here. In the museum you'll see biographies here and there, and very many other details. I couldn't capture everything. There's another statement here. This seems to have been spoken by a slave. It says, we have been a source of wealth to this republic. Our tears and blood were sacrificed at the altar of this nation's avarice. Our unpaid labor was a stepping stone to its financial success. And that's from Sojourner Truth, former slave and abolition campaigner, 1875. It continues to say, the forced labor of millions of Africans and their descendants transformed the landscape and future of the Americas. Enslaved Africans and their descendants cleared the forests and bush, built roads and houses, dug canals, worked down mines and in forges, all at the whim and to the financial benefit of their owners. They grew sugar, cotton, tobacco. They created environment and wealth which supported the plantation owners and their families. The Africans brought a wide range of skills to the Americas, such as rice growing and metal working, many owners would hire out their skilled slaves to work for other masters, especially in the growing towns and cities which needed a skilled workforce. What a story. And then there's a section that they call Profits of Slavery. And the profits here have been listed. One of them is buildings and wealth. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, under profits of slavery, you'll see houses, you'll see banks, charity, industry, and we will not go to the details. Another section here says that there are many legacies of the transatlantic slavery. One of them is racism and poverty. Transatlantic slavery has left a dangerous legacy of racism. Many Africans, Caribbean and South American countries have faced long-term underdevelopment because of slavery and colonialism. And then it says, an unquenchable spirit. Despite the trauma of transatlantic slavery, people of African descent have helped shape the society and cultures of the Americas and Europe. The spirit of enslaved Africans has lived on through their descendants and achievements. And that's why I told you that this story, if there is one thing it will do to the African of the present day African, I think it will inspire their resilience and tenacity and their determination to completely rise above setback, discouragements, and every other hindrance that we have to fight so that we can see positive growth in our very lives. Well, some other sections will talk about the movements of rebellion against slavery, how it was birthed, how it kept growing, gaining momentum, and you will see all that. So I won't go to every detail really, but I just felt that I needed to share this. I rarely speak about slavery, I rarely speak about the history of the inhuman treatment of my people, in the history, and I never talk much about colonialism. I never talk much about neo-colonialism, which is happening even in our day. But I want to focus now on the way forward and what we can do. I think the lesson here is very clear that we've come a long way here. We are simply unstoppable. I think any community that has a history of having been enslaved, and yet we can see tangible progress and tangible achievements by our people, I think this serves to inspire us now. Let's forgive, but let's come out of this with lessons that nothing can stop, that the human spirit is a resilient spirit. I think God made us as a very resilient people. And that's why none of us should write off another, that if today you are in the lowest rock bottom position, you could still rise up and you could still amount to something. So let nobody look down on anyone. And I want to encourage my African brothers who are living in diaspora, in different parts of the world. I know about the identity crisis that we face when we are out here, away from home. But let's be encouraged and let's realize that we are not second to any race. We are not second-class citizens. We are not inferior to anyone. We are not less Sabines, we are not the least. It's written in the Bible that thou and you, O Bethlehem, you are not the least among the princes of Judah. So friends, we are not the least, and we can accomplish and achieve. And indeed, there is evidence to this, and we will continue to achieve. So let everyone be encouraged. This, again, is not a judgment to any community or any race, just an appreciation of history and an acknowledgement of what took place, and an attempt to just share the inspiration that we can draw from this. So thank you so much for your time, and let's keep talking. I invite you to research on this on your own time and using your own other platforms. And let's talk about this, and let's challenge our leaders, especially in Africa, that as they go to represent us in negotiations and in international platforms, let them not forget this legacy. Let them not use positions of power to benefit themselves and their families. Let them also look after the wider good for every person that they represent, because we deserve it. And the worst thing that can happen to us now is to have leaders who are only mindful of themselves, not forgetting that this is a shared history. And if there is anything good that can happen now, is for us to rise together as a people, not just some select few. Anyway, we will keep talking about this, and thank you for your time. God bless you all. Well, I'm outside now. The museum is over there, and I just figured that it would be helpful to come over here and have a look at these stories, so that I can be reminded of the history and the heritage and the past sufferings and indignity that our people, especially my ancestors, the black man and woman, what they were made to go through, and what history dealt them very bitter dose of inhumane treatment and subjection to suffering of unimaginable, of very great magnitude.